Our South Winterbourne journey begins at the Nine Stones, a prehistoric circle constructed around 4,000 years ago, situated to the west of Winterbourne Abbas. The South Winterbourne River flows through Winterbourne Abbas, Steepleton, St Martin, Monkton, Herringston, Farringdon and Came, from where the river continues its journey to meet the Froome at West Stafford.
My name is Jean Saddington. I was appointed as team vicar, so I look after the three churches of the valley: Martinstown, Winterbourne Steepleton and Winterbourne Abbas.
William Barnes had three churches he was responsible for. Obviously the parish church of Winterbourne Came, another old church at Whitcombe, which is now a disused church, but also there were the remains of a church at Winterbourne Farringdon. Barnes said he used to go to Winterbourne Came and also to Whitcombe to preach, but he went to Winterbourne Farringdon to pray. Oh aye, they had one child beside, and a finer your eyes never met. 'Twere a dear little fella that died in the summer that comes with such head. By the mowers too thoughtless and fonny were then a set off from our eyes, from the light of the dew-drying sun. Aye, from days under blue-hollowed skies. He went out to the mowers in mead when the sun were arose to his height, and the men were a-swinging the sneed with their arms in white sleeves left and right. And out there, as they rested at noon, they drenched him with ale horns too deep, till his thoughts were drowned in a swoon. Aye, his life were a-smothered in sleep. Then they laid him there right on the ground on a grass heap, a-sweltering with het, with his hair all a-wetted around his young face with the big drops of sweat. In his little left palm he'd a-set his right hand, his forefinger's tip, and for some that he wouldn't forget. Aye, some thought that he wouldn't a-slip. Then they took him in home to his bed, and he rose from his pillow no more, for the curls in his sleek little head to be blown by the wind out of door. For he died while the hay rustled grey on the stattle so lately begun, like the mown grass a-dried by the day, aye, the swat flowers a-killed by the sun.
I think in the UK we have between 80 and 90% of all the chalk streams in the world, so it's very rare indeed. It attracts all your normal river species that you get through here, but the problem is because it's a Winterbourne, it dries up and it gets wet quite often, and it's kind of, the top end of the river is very wet during the winter and very dry in the summer, and so any species that kind of develop and are used to that habitat has to adapt to that drying and that wetting, and so they move quite a lot upstream and they move quite a lot downstream, and you get a lot of specialists that are used to that drying out and that wetting up. I mean, you get the usual species like water voles, and you'll get all your normal bankside vegetation, your irises and everything else, but they have to kind of adapt and they have to move with the times, I guess, with the year.
Winterbourne Steepleton has a west gallery erected because, like most of the churches, they are a mix. Steepleton's a mix of Saxon and Norman, but the Victorians, I think it was 1871, put in a west gallery for a west gallery band. Since I've been here, we've tried to build those musicians up. So when they're all there's about 8 musicians that play. They don't play in the west gallery, they sit at the front. What was very different for me, I hadn't experienced this before, was that people bring jam jars to the carol services at Martinstown and at Steepleton. and then they're given a candle that they can put in their jam jar. They bring something to hold a candle, in other words, usually a jam jar. And that's rather lovely and rather rustic, I think.
The sheep fair was held every November on St Martin's Day. It was the last big fair of the season. There's still evidence of a lot of sheep having used this village for a long time. Just behind the pub, for example, there is the sheep wash pool.
The greatest excitement in the farming year, at least for the children of the village, came in May with the annual washing of the sheep at the sheep washing pool between the Brewer's Arms and the smithy, just north of the Winterbourne. Hatches directed the flow of water through the gardens of Hillview cottages into the pool. The first sign that this annual event was near was the arrival round the wash pool of a load of hurdles from the farmers to fence the pool and to make lanes which led sheep to and from the pool. The first flock would be ready about 6 a.m. The ringing of the sheep bells and the barking of the dogs let the village know that sheep washing would start that morning. Usually the work lasted until dinner time, or at least until the Brewer's Arms had opened, and some were really merry by the time they walked their clean flocks home. In 1945, the village had decided to buy the bells as a war memorial in memory of the 5 men from the parish who lost their lives in the Second World War. A tablet bearing the names of Frederick Chick, Alfred Dunford, John Hocking, Frederick Park and Albert Trent is on the wall near the tower stairway.
And to say, for me, it's unconsciously there. But all as I walk through the village, there is that sound. In some places more than others, that there is the sound of the river all the time. That is very much a part of sort of your being almost as you walk through. In the quiet moments, there is the sound of that river. I have a lovely over there. I have a lovely little footbridge over the river. And when I go that way out, I would tend to look down and notice whether the river is low or whether the river is high.
When you walk along the Winterbourne, when you have a look, you'll see lots of very small fish in there. So you see a lot of trout. The trout will be very small, they'll be very brown and they'll have little red spots on them. And on the Winterbournes, they don't grow very big. You might get some grayling as well. They have a really big, like kind of coloured dorsal fin on the back of them. And they also like to travel around in packs. Watercress is everywhere. There's 2 types though, you've got to be very careful. There's 2 types. There's normal watercress and then fool's watercress. Normal watercress is fine, you can eat it, it's not a problem, but the fool's watercress can give you a bit of a bad stomach, and you just have to look at the leaves. The normal watercress is a lot more circular, whereas the fool's cress is a bit more jaggedy, a bit more spiky, like the edges of a nettle leaf.
We have a thriving cricket club.
We opened with a match against the MCC in 2000. That was a big day for us.
As oft I see by sight, or oft in mind, the ridges on the ground, the mark of many a little croft and house, where now no wall is found, I call the folk to life again, and build their houses up anew. I ween I shape them wrong, but who can now outmark their shapes to men? I call them back to path or door in warm-cheeked life below the sun, and see them tread their foot-worn floor that now is all by grass or run. To me, the most of them may seem of fairer looks than were their own, yet some of all their lives were shown as fairs, the fairest of my dream. I seem to see the church's wall, on some grey tomb below you, and hear the churchyard wicket fall behind the people passing through. I seem to hear above my head the bell that in the tower was hung, but whither went its iron tongue that here bemoan the long-lost dead?
Long ago we built a church, stone on stones, cradle for bones. We built our church. Apple tree boughs lie under the hill. Here is peace sleeping still. Now we lie beneath the earth, God's children like you. Grasses stirred by winds and birds in the sky so blue, and all is still under the hill and beneath the earth.
The physical remains of Winterbourne Farringdon are located 500 metres to the west of Winterbourne Came. Today you can see only the remains of the 14th century St German's Church, but at least 8 buildings and 4 enclosures, possibly crofts, are suggested by the surrounding landscape. It's also being suggested that the eastern part of this site could be the remains of Winterbourne Came.
Green mould in summer bars to show that they've adripped in winter wet. The hoof-worn ring of ground below the tree to tell us storms were hit. The trees in rank along the ledge did show where once did bloom a hedge, and where the furrow marks to stripe the down, the wheat once rustled ripe. Each mark of things are gone from view, to eyesight's one, to soul sight too.